that are themed as haram and themed as things that may lead you astray from a more noble path.
Yeah.
Now, from
Okay.
Yeah.
from a like logical standpoint, I can see where religions, generally Islam, Christianity, and so on, so have their fundamental cores. And my thing is where we draw the line between those kind of like fundamental principles, and then we go to the more intricate principles where, for in particular, I was talking to someone the other week and we were talking about circumcision, and he was talking about the Persian Empire and circumcision and how that basically arose and the origin of that. Now he said that basically the origin of circumcision in the Persian Empire was when the Persians took over their lot of empire, right? They would have people converting into the religion because you knew there was a higher tax tariff for people who were non-Muslim than people who were Muslim. So it made sense financially for a lot of people to convert into Islam financially. Now for me, that doesn't necessarily say true faith. That says almost not necessarily a coercion, but an incentive kind of thing. And I don't necessarily think that's true faith in particular. So as a way of deterring people, this person basically promoted that for them to prove their allegiance to Islam, that they would have to get circumcised. And now we have a practice of circumcision that is rooted in many cultures, not just Islam, in African communities, in European communities, even in Judaic communities, that people have such sentimental value to these certain myths, which were geopolitical strategies back in the day, but are now so ingrained in our religion that we take it as gospel and key. So I want to have a talk to you today about certain superstitions and just opening the idea to deliberating within the Islamic community. Because I feel like there's a lot of brothers out there who want to talk about subjects, want to open the platform for debate and whatever. But because of that fear of superstition and that fear of being a non-believer, that they take a step back, and it's almost unspeakable to be labeled as a liberal Muslim, right? When you don't have to be a liberal Muslim, you can just be a Muslim, thinking Muslim, an educated Muslim. You know, it doesn't have to have a label on it, and it doesn't have to be you straying away from the teachings. It's supposedly you trying to find the truth behind the teachings and so on and so. And confirming your belief, solidifying your knowledge and solidifying your faith. Now, obviously, a lot of people will say, well, if you believe, then you should just believe. Faith should just be faith on its own. But I know in particular with certain religious leaders or even prophets, they were given, I can't remember what the Arabic name is for it, but it's the proofs by Allah. They were given the proofs in order to convince people that he's not a fake and he's coming with a message from Allah. So I want to talk to you about superstitions and how you feel about there's certain taboo subjects within the Islamic community that are kept under key and chain by this culture of superstition.
I think when we talk about anything that has connotations attached to it, we need to understand where the connotations are actually coming from. So when we use the word superstition in the English language, usually we're referring to some kind of magical, otherwise extra rational recourse or discourse. So sometimes when we talk about witchcraft, for example, superstition is one of those words that we use to describe it. Obviously now, the post-enlightened West, when it looks back at, for example, the reign of James I or James VI of Scotland, I mean, he's the same person, from 1606 onwards. I mean, his campaign against witchcraft and these things, I always looked, I would say in a way, anachronistically. So you look at kind of the way we look at things now, post-enlightenment, scientific discourse, and superimpose that on, for instance, the Tudor and post-Tudor period of time. So, like, it depends on what we mean by superstition. So that's one thing. The second thing you said, which was very interesting, which I think is worth talking about, really, is talking about liberal Islam or liberal Muslims, and or some call themselves feminist. You're talking about feminist Muslims and these kinds of labels, right? And what I would say is that the extent to which one could identify or agree with those political philosophies / ideologies is the extent to which they would agree with Islam.
Of course.
If those individuals who claim to be Muslims believe in the premise that actually Islam is not just a man-made religion, it's actually something from God, it's something from the all-knowing, it's from the all-wise, it's from the all-powerful.
Of course.
So if that's the premise they're running by, you have to think about all of the injunctions, the prescriptions, the do's and the don'ts from the Quran and the Sunnah as branches from the proverbial tree. The core of the tree, the root of the tree, are the principles, the overriding universal principles which underpin the religion of Islam, which include things like, obviously at the core of it, Tawheed, the idea of one God, believing in one God, submission to one God, and these things there. So, and obviously the evidences of the Prophet Muhammad and the Quran and the Sunnah and these things. So one is convinced epistemologically with the fact that Islam is truth with a capital T and that it comes from God, then that constitutes the root of the tree. The branches of the tree then become the injunctions which become almost automatically subscribed to. Because we think, okay, well, human beings have X amount of ways of structuring societies aforetime, presently, and continually. So if that's the case, who knows best on how to structure society, how individuals should live in a familial context, how a family should live in a societal context, and so on and so forth, how governments should run. So the Islamic answer would be God knows best. Allahu A'lam, we would say God knows best. So if that's the case, then it makes sense for us to use Quran as the ultimate barometer by which and through which we assess all of those other political philosophies, including liberalism and feminism, etc., and where in which they differ with the Quranic discourse or the Islamic discourse, we would reject them. Now, why I find it sometimes contradictory for someone to identify themselves as a liberal Muslim, and here when I talk about liberalism, I'm talking about a political philosophy, or a feminist Muslim, and once again, I'm talking about the political philosophy, is because the scholastic traditions that are associated with those respective political philosophies, for example, are not always in contradistinction with the Quranic and Islamic narrative. I feel like at one point there has to be compromise. Like the Quran says, وَدُّوا لَوْ تُدْهِنُوا فَيُدْهِنُونَ. They wish that you can compromise so that they can compromise with you.
Of course.
So the Quran says that.
This is it,
exactly, right. So you compromise with them, and you will compromise with you compromise with them. So there is a mutual compromise, which Islam at the base level doesn't allow. In fact, it criticizes.
It does,
So I guess what I'm trying to say is that you have to kind of choose the direction you want to live your life in. You can't be pulled apart. You know what I mean?
Go.
You can't be pulled apart. And in psychology, the people that actually live like that are associated with something called cognitive dissonance. So for me, and that's why I made recently, I got a Twitter account. I'm just kind of putting quotes there, you know. I put a Twitter post recently, a tweet. It's a cool tweet, yeah? I'm new to the thing, right?
I haven't got one, so I wouldn't even know.
I'm very new to it myself. So I was saying that I put a tweet that so-called feminist Muslims are either uninformed or unsatisfied with either Islam or feminism respectively, right? That's the situation, because for instance, when we talk about inheritance, if we look at the scholastic tradition, the inheritance laws in the Quran would not be in contradistinction with the feminist narrative. The so-called patriarchal narrative of the feminists would not be in contradistinction with the family unit and the fact that the father is, has these rights and the mother has these rights in Islam and the husband has these rights in Islam. So you have to make a compromise, or you have to falsify your belief, you have to fake your belief, you have to pretend that you believe in something when you don't actually believe in something, or you have to superimpose a narrative on one of those things. So you either superimpose an Islamic narrative on the feminist discourse, or vice versa.
See, I feel like you're in danger of doing exactly what you accuse other people of doing, and this is where I think we need to draw a conclusion, just so that, like you said, there can be a compromise on both sides, so that we can build a bridge together and work together. So obviously, I'll start off with the first thing, because you said a few things, which is really good. Like with the superstition thing, yes, there is a leniency to excusing it to mumbo jumbo, superstition and supernatural, whatever. But if we look at it historically and factually, superstitions were actually certain things that were made to be supernatural and uncontrollable by human beings in order to deter any behavior within that effort, within that environment. I'll give you the mummy's tombs curse, for example, right? Why do we have the mummy's tombs curse? We have the mummy's tombs curse because people were trying to excavate the pyramids at the time, but you had a lot of pyramid robbers basically taking the gold and all the riches of the pharaohs back when. Now historically that's not good, because that's evidence that they're taking historically from us. So they made up this myth, right, of the superstitious mummy's curse to keep people away from that, and it worked very well. And it's the same with aliens, right? We have a civilization of supposedly white supremacy who love to speak about aliens, especially when it comes to foreign works of architecture. Like they'll often say the aliens built the pyramids. The aliens didn't build the pyramids. They're just scared to admit that black people built the pyramids or Africans built the pyramids because it takes away their valid reason of supposedly enslaving subhuman human beings. So when we're talking about superstition, yes, there's that side of paranormal activity if you've ever seen the film, but then there's also the real side of political.
How would you define superstition yourself?
For me, I use superstition as the word, in particular in this case, in the sense that a subject is not necessarily something that you should delve into, right? Because it may lead you astray, or you may do
say that again. So
superstition for me, like you said, there's the paranormal extra movie, the dramatized Hollywood version that you.
But what is, like, when you say paranormal?
Yeah.
So once again, because the thing is
uncontrollable by human behavior or human.